Hello and welcome back. I hope you are well. I recently participated in a Draw This in Your Style challenge and I'm going to take you along with me for that today. The challenge I joined in on is by foxcrowstudio and I'll leave their post on screen with the original art for the challenge, and you can go check out their Instagram and maybe join in if you fancy. Hey! And today I am using my Etchr 100% cotton watercolour sketchbook in the cold press version, and it's the same sketchbook I used for the Funguary challenge last month. I will leave in the cards the video for that if you're interested and haven't seen it. I am using a very similar process as I did for those with this, and that's week 4 of the Funguary challenge there. And again, I'm using a very similar process with the inking, the watercolour and the colour pencil on top today. And I started with a pencil sketch that you can see here. It's my first time drawing a raccoon, and I wanted to focus on the really round nature of them, especially when they're sat down, and also the fluffiness of them. So my focus was round and fluffy. We want a big round boy. And once I got the pencil sketch down, I started with the inking. So I'm inking with my usual brush pen, which is the Unipin brush pen with waterproof ink. I've tried a few different brush pens and most of them with this kind of tip are all work the same. This one is just one that I tend to use the most because I can get it really cheap around where I live. And I start inking. So I have a little piece of paper towel under my hand so that I don't smudge the ink while I'm working, because it can get on your hand, especially I've noticed with using watercolour paper, it tends to just sit on the surface of the paper a tiny bit longer than more papers with less sizing, I'd probably say, is likely the cause of it. And off the bat, I do want to say I enjoyed this a lot. I did enjoy it, and I think it's cute, but I noticed quite a few mistakes that I did with the raccoon. It is my first time drawing one, and I noticed a few different things that didn't translate well with how I ended up portraying certain parts of it. And it might also just be the fact that as an artist, and I'm sure a few of you can relate if you enjoy drawing to any degree, that we tend to notice our mistakes much more than other people might. And there's nothing wrong with mistakes. I want to be transparent about that with you guys because, yeah, it's all part of the journey, and I'm encouraged now to draw more raccoons and different animals that I'm not as familiar with in order to get better at them. I feel like a lot of my animal drawing for the last year has really helped me gain a general sense of animals, but there's definitely specifics about them about each animal that I can only really start learning by drawing the animal and just by practicing more and more animals and the fundamentals in general. The second stage after the inking is the first watercolour wash. So I believe I mentioned this in the Funguary video. One process that I like to do sometimes with watercolour is to do a really light initial wash in order to establish the white areas that I want to leave where I want to leave the paper as white for the piece, because I'm not going to use gouache or anything to produce white. I'm just going to have the white of the paper. So I use this initial wash here to establish where the whites are going to be, but I leave the pores for where the darkest darks are going to be as well. That's just a choice I made this time because I just didn't want to use the orange on the pores, because the pores were going to end up being more of a purplish colour. Same with the stripes on the tail. I just didn't want to use the orange under the purple in this case. And I went in with the yellow on the star and then a really pale I think I went in with a pale purple on the paws in order to establish the colours, or establish the whites of the paper even. Yeah, I'm going in with the really light purple now. So once I had the initial wash down to figure out where the lightest lights are going to be, I then went in with the mid-tones and then the darker tones. I didn't go super in detail with loads and loads of layers with this. I kind of went with more of the effect I used with the deer in Funguary, where I did a few layers of watercolour and then finished off the effect of shading with the colour pencil. And like I said, I'm still experimenting to see what I like and don't like about this process. I'm still not super sure about what I think about the texture that you get with the colour pencil on the cold press paper. I do still want to try it out more on 100% cotton hot press paper and see if I like that texture, that result more or not. And I do certainly like the texture in some instances, especially with the Amanita galactica mushroom in Funguary. I can't remember which week that was, but I loved the blue, it looks almost like granulation on the mushroom. So I do definitely like the texture in some instances, but I'm learning where and when I do and don't want it. So now I'm going in with the darker washes, and the wash that I use on the bubble, like the helmet of this little space raccoon, is pretty much the orange that I just go with for it. I wanted it to be quite light, with the main intensity being on the raccoon, because I kind of want it to look like glass, so I don't want it to be too intense. And then later on I add in shading on the bubble helmet glass thing with colour pencil towards the end. With the body I go quite bright straight away. It takes a moment for you to see through the sheen of the water as it dries. And I go with a more warm orange for most of the fur on the raccoon, with then the purple being for the darker areas. I mostly went after the colour palette of the original, apart from I went darker on the underbelly, whereas I believe on the original the underbelly is like a cream, a really light cream colour, like ivory almost. Whereas I just wanted the lightest lights to be the stripes around the face. I do really enjoy Draw This in Your Style challenges. This is the second one I've ever participated in, and I do really enjoy them. I want to join in on more in the future for sure, but I also want to do some of my own as well at some point. And if you'd be interested in joining in for those, let me know in the comments. I have a few ideas for one that I would like to do soon. So yeah, we'll see about that. Now I'm going in with the darker tones of the orange fur, so for the underbelly and then the shadow layer. For the shadow layer, I wanted to produce a little bit more of the fluffy texture of the fur, but without taking away or contrasting too much from the line art, which is something I'm still trying to experiment with and see what I do and don't like doing with that. And we'll see with more experimenting what ends up coming out of it. I do encourage people to experiment, and if you struggle with experimenting, figuring out what is holding you back with it, because for me, experimenting is a really, really valuable part of my art practice, and it's something that I've had to work on for a while now because of things like fear in the art practice, fear of making mistakes, perfectionism, and fear of failure and all of those things. I've spoken about it a bit in other videos about reframing those things and how valuable they are for learning. And they are valuable for learning because by being open to making mistakes and by being open to seeing your failures, you can figure out what you do and don't like, where you need to improve, also where you have been improving and things like that as well. And yeah, by doing this, I'm figuring out things about not just the process, but about drawing animals, about drawing raccoons in particular, and also working on that vulnerability when it comes to being open with my creativity, being open to things like failure and all the possibilities of experimenting and practicing. With the final few layers of shadows here, I end up moving on to the colored pencil. So I have already done the orange colour pencil and the helmets by the point that you're seeing this clip here. So you can kind of see some of the textures in the fur from the shading. I'm trying to slightly produce an effect of 3D form without it being too intense. Again, still something I'm trying to figure out and experiment with. For the purples, I used mainly a blend of 3 different colours. I used magenta, indanthrone blue, and what was the red I used? I think it was carmine? So a mixture of, no, it wasn't carmine, it was purple. So I used blue, violet, indanthrone blue, and magenta for the purple of the feet. For the shadow layer of the purple fur, I mainly used the magenta, as you can see here, and then layered indanthrone blue on top of that to produce a darker muted purple, and then kept the violet mainly for the main body of the fur, as you can see here, to kind of produce the effect of the rounding of the form. And here you can see some close-ups of the texture. And you can see the gradient it produces just through colour pencil in the helmet there. And this is the final result. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!